Merry Christmas to all of you. It wasn't so merry in some parts of the world though. In Afghanistan, Pakistan dropped bombs. Apparently, they're fighting cross-border terrorism. I'll repeat that for you. Pakistan is complaining about terrorists backed by Kabul and now attacking them. Karma, chickens coming home to roost, whatever you like to call it. No cheer in Ukraine either. Russia is attacking their energy infrastructure. That means power cuts in the biting winter. In Bangladesh, the founder of a terror group is the new Home Secretary. In Iran, the regime is giving concessions to the people, WhatsApp and Google Play. Will it pacify them or feed the fire? In the US, Donald Trump is appointing Indian Americans to key positions, but he is not being able to shield them from racist attacks. In Vietnam, a new internet law is facing immense backlash. While most of Japan is anxious, the findings of a new survey. As Santa tours the world on his sleigh, what does he see when he looks down? We've tried an experiment, bear with us. And how Gen Z is transforming religion on TikTok, calling Jesus Christ divine bro. All this and more coming up. The headlines first. An Azerbaijan Airlines passenger jet crashes in Kazakhstan. There were more than 65 people on board when the aircraft burst into flames. Authorities say 32 people survived the crash. The plane was flying from Azerbaijan's capital Baku to Chechnya in Russia. An investigation is underway to identify the cause of the crash. Tragedy strikes in the Indian state of Goa as well. A tourist boat capsizes off the Kalangut beach. At least one person has been killed, 20 others have been rescued. This incident comes a week after a Navy boat crashed into a passenger ferry off the coast of Mumbai. Hamas says new Israeli conditions are delaying a Gaza ceasefire deal, but the Netanyahu government has made no statement about any fresh demands. Recently, indirect talks between Israel and Hamas took place in Doha. Since the war broke out in October last year, there has been only a one-week-long truce at the end of 2023. Japan raises concerns over China's military build-up around Taiwan with Beijing. The issue came up during the meeting of the foreign ministers of the two countries. Japan and China are key trading partners, but friction over disputed territories and military spending has frayed ties in recent years. No end to post-election violence in Mozambique. At least 20 people, including 2 police officers, killed in the last 24 hours. Protesters ransacked shops, banks, supermarkets and petrol stations. Fresh violence erupted after the ruling party's win was confirmed by Mozambique's highest court. More than 100 people have been killed in the violence, which began in October. And Taiwan rejects Uber's plan to buy Food Panda on the island. Taipei says the deal would significantly harm market competition. The US ride-hailing giant was aiming to acquire Food Panda for almost $1 billion. This would have merged the top 2 players in Taiwan's food delivery market. What goes around comes around. It's a simple rule of life. Turns out it also applies to geopolitics. Just ask Pakistan. They have carried out cross-border airstrikes on Afghanistan. And the targets? Terror hideouts. It must be a strange feeling for Pakistan. They're used to sponsoring terrorists, but now they claim to be eliminating them. The attack happened on Tuesday night. Pakistan used jets and drones to bomb Afghanistan's Barmal district. It's located near the border, right next to the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province. Pakistan has not officially claimed the attack yet, but their military is dropping hints. Some officials have said the target was the TTP, the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, also known as the Pakistan Taliban, the TTP. On paper, this group is different from Afghanistan's Taliban, but they do share some similarities, like the same Pashtun core. the same Islamic ideology and the same use of terror tactics. The TTP's goal is to overthrow the regime in Islamabad. They want an Islamic emirate in Pakistan. But Pakistan says Kabul is shielding the TTP, although Kabul says this is your internal matter. They have called the latest attack cowardly. They've also promised to hit back. The Afghans, they've promised to hit back. And casualties? Again, two different versions. Pakistani sources say that 20 TTP terrorists were killed in these strikes. But Kabul says 46 people have died, most of them women and children. And here's the interesting part. Hours before this attack, there was a meeting in Kabul. Pakistan's Afghan envoy met the Taliban's foreign minister. Immediately after that, Islamabad attacked. So clearly, Pakistan is trying to send a message. We are asking you nicely, but if you refuse, we have other means. The question is, will the aggression work? It hasn't in the past. Pakistan launched a similar attack in March this year, the exact same template. Pakistan said terrorists were killed, but Kabul said 8 civilians died. Despite that, terror attacks have not subsided. Just look at the numbers. Pakistan logged more than 850 terrorist attacks this year. That's up from 650 last year. Put together, these incidents have claimed more than 1,000 lives. Last month, the month of November, was among the worst. Nearly 250 people were killed in a single month. Among them were 68 security personnel. These numbers make one thing quite clear. Pakistan has not been able to contain the TTP threat. Just last week, there was an attack. TTP terrorists targeted a military checkpost in South Waziristan. They killed 16 Pakistani soldiers. Chances are that attack is what triggered this response. But where do things go from here? Kabul may have promised to hit back, but it's unlikely that they will. Instead, they could offer more support to the TTP, more weapons, more hideouts, and more political support. So the direct response may come from the TTP, not the Afghan Taliban. Meanwhile, expect Pakistan to take a dual approach, strikes on one hand, diplomacy on the other. Islamabad has been trying to rally support against the TTP. They have complained multiple times at the United Nations. The most recent was last week. Listen in.
The TTP is fast emerging as an umbrella organization for other terrorist groups in the area, with clear objectives of destabilizing Afghanistan's neighbors. We have evidence of its collaboration with other terrorist groups like the Majid Brigade that is utilizing terrorism to disrupt Pakistan's economic cooperation with China, especially CPEC. Given its long association with Al-Qaeda, the TTP could emerge as Al-Qaeda's arm with a regional and global terrorist agenda.
So to recap, your neighbor is harboring and supporting terrorists. Those terrorists are attacking you. You are complaining to the world, but nobody is listening to you. Where have we heard this before? This is exactly what Pakistan does to India, except now Afghanistan is doing it to Pakistan. Islamabad may try to rally support against the TTP, but frankly, it is a long shot. You see, there are multiple terror groups in Afghanistan. Among them are Al-Qaeda and the TTP. The world is more concerned about the former, about Al-Qaeda. So all the Taliban has to do is promise to crack down on Al-Qaeda. They will face no pressure on the TTP. And I know it sounds like karma, but it's also poor strategic thinking by Pakistan. They cultivated the Taliban for decades and they applauded the fall of Kabul in 2021. Do you know why? Because Pakistan thought that the Taliban would help them to settle the border, to crack down on the TTP and to take on India. Unfortunately for them, none of this has happened. The Taliban have refused to settle the border. They're openly harboring the TTP and they're eager to befriend India. Pakistan only has itself to blame for the situation. They used terrorists to bleed Afghanistan and India. Those same terrorists have now turned against them. It's a lesson to all countries around the world. Terrorists and extremists can never be allies or proxies. In the end, they will harm you too. Ukraine has been struck again. There's no relief for them even on Christmas Day. Today, Russia attacked eastern Ukraine. They launched more than 70 missiles and 100 attack drones. They struck multiple targets in a sweeping assault. They were going after Ukraine's energy infrastructure. The strikes led to blackouts in several regions of Ukraine. Russia says its goal was to weaken Ukraine, specifically its military-industrial complex. They need electricity for their factories to make the weapons that Ukraine uses against Russia. So Moscow is attacking Ukraine's energy grid. It wants to cut off the power supply. But as always, there is collateral damage. The people of Ukraine, at least one civilian, is dead. The people are living without electricity, in sub-zero temperatures, with long winter months still ahead of them. Ukrainians are suffering the cold and bracing for the next Russian attack. On Christmas, which is their biggest festival, many of them spent the night underground. They took shelter in metro stations.
We always expect so-called wishes from our neighbor. Yes, it's an automatic reaction. Yes, during every air raid siren, I take my children and go to the metro.
Doing such things early in the morning when people sleep. I feel sorry for Kharkiv. Constant strikes there. I don't understand what they want to achieve with this.
Zelensky has responded sharply to these attacks. As always, he's criticized Vladimir Putin, the Russian president. Zelensky called the attacks inhuman. But he must also take some responsibility for this, because he is the one who triggered the fresh wave of hostilities. This weekend, Ukraine attacked Russia. We told you about it. It was a 9/11 style attack with drones crashing into apartment buildings. This was in the city of Kazan, in Russia's southwest. It is one of Russia's wealthiest cities. Earlier this year, Kazan hosted BRICS leaders for a summit. Prime Minister Modi was there too, along with other leaders. This city was a high-profile target. Kiev did not officially take responsibility for the strike, but there was no doubt that it was a Ukrainian strike. They've been ramping up their operations inside Russia. Earlier this month, they assassinated a top Russian general. Kiev pulled off a bomb blast in Moscow. It was a targeted strike in the Russian capital, and it killed a general. Today, we saw some dramatic images from southeast Russia. Moscow says this was a drone attack. It says these were Ukrainian drones. The Russian side destroyed them. Some of their debris fell on a shopping center where it triggered a fire. Remember when Kazan was attacked, the Russian president vowed to retaliate. So today's strike in Ukraine was perhaps the payback that Putin promised. And this cycle of violence is unlikely to end soon. Both Ukraine and Russia are ramping up operations, trying to secure territorial gains, to hold on to what they have before peace talks begin. And more than Putin, it is Zelensky who's under pressure. His forces are struggling to hold the front lines. 2024 has been a tough year for him. Despite repeated offensives, Ukrainians have failed to push back the Russian forces. 2025 could be even more difficult. Western aid is expected to shrink, especially if Donald Trump keeps his promise. He wants to cut aid and force both sides into a settlement. The writing is on the wall for Zelensky, and he is reluctantly admitting it, signaling that Ukraine may be ready to hold talks. He's not talking about a dialogue with Russia yet. At this point, Zelensky is only asking his allies to think long-term, and he's trying to woo Trump.
I think that Putin is not adequate, and he's very dangerous for everybody. And I want very much Trump to help us and to finish this war.
Right now, Zelensky has the weakest hand. No significant territorial gains, no security guarantees, and increasing attacks from Russia. And that only means a precarious future for the people of Ukraine. Around mid-October, India added a new group to its terror list, a group that was not recently active. It's called the Hizb ut-Tahrir, or HUT. 2 months later, it's clear why India added it to the list. Because the HUT has found fertile ground in Bangladesh. Let me introduce one of its main leaders, Naseemul Ghani. He used to be a career bureaucrat, but in the year 2000, he set up the HUT in Dhaka. Back then, the Bangladesh Nationalist Party, the BNP, was in power. They did not care about radicals or Islamists because they were the same. When Sheikh Hasina came to power in 2009, she banned the HUT. Since then, their leaders have been accused of terrorism. Now with Hasina gone, the HUT is back and Naseemul Ghani has been appointed the Home Secretary. Let me repeat that. This is the man who founded a terror group in Dhaka. He is now Bangladesh's top bureaucrat in the Home Ministry, and he is not alone. Let me introduce another HUT leader, Mahfouz Alam. He is a member of Muhammad Yunus's cabinet. Last week, he posted this picture on social media. It shows Bangladesh annexing India's northeastern states. He said India has colonized the northeast. These are the sort of people in Yunus's team. Yet Dhaka wonders why India is worried. So tonight, let's take a closer look at this group, the HUT. What do they stand for? What is their strategy? And how will it affect India? The Hizb ut-Tahrir was established in 1953 in Jerusalem. The title means Party of Liberation. They reject ideas like secularism and democracy. Their goal is to create a global caliphate, much like the Islamic State. So how are they different from ISIS? Because on paper, the HUT rejects violence, which is frankly an absurd claim. Without violence, how do they plan to dismantle democracies? By asking nicely? The fact is that this non-violence claim is nonsense. It's a cover to escape crackdowns. The HUT has chapters and factions in 45 countries. The one in Bangladesh was set up in the year 2000. And what's their strategy? To radicalize people. A number of groups are already doing that in Bangladesh, including the Jamaat-e-Islami. But the HUT is slightly different because they have a different target audience. The Jamaat draws people from rural Bangladesh, while the HUT targets big cities. They radicalize college students and professionals. How? Apparently, storytelling is a big tool. They talk about Muslims being massacred around the world, about rising Islamophobia, and about so-called evil Western ideas. The strategy is called shock, demolish, and rebuild. Shock them with claims of massacre, demolish their belief in ideas like democracy, and rebuild using Islamist ideology. This is the HUT playbook in a nutshell. And from the looks of it, it is working. In October, Bangladeshi students took out massive rallies. They were carrying flags of the Islamic State. Back then, Bangladeshi officials blamed the HUT for this. They also arrested 10 people linked to the march. But now that same HUT is being rewarded. So how should India see this development? Well, there is an HUT charter in India as well, and New Delhi is quite worried about it. Yesterday, Indian officials charged 2 men from Tamil Nadu. Both of them are members of the same group, the HUT. They were trying to recruit students to their cause. Last month, India's Home Ministry organized a key counter-terrorism meet. All the intelligence and security agencies were present, and one of the issues they discussed was the HUT. So clearly, India is concerned. There will be 2 main worries for New Delhi. The first is instability in the northeast. These radicals could tie up with separatists in India and they will likely get a free pass from Dhaka. After all, the Home Secretary is one of their own. And second, spillover of radicalism. The HUT can pump money and resources into radicalizing Indian youth. The case in Tamil Nadu is a clear example, so India needs to prepare itself. Asking Yunus to help is pointless. Forget cracking down on radicals. He's appointing them to run the government. So India's best bet is to be vigilant, to tighten border security, and to ramp up intelligence operations. Bangladesh is playing with fire by courting the HUT. It may be too late to help them, but it's not too late for India. Our next story is from Iran, where the internet is both a lifeline and a battleground. It's quite an interesting story, and it has just seen a new twist. Iran is loosening its grip on the internet. It has lifted its ban on two platforms, WhatsApp and Google Play. Until now, they were both banned in Iran, WhatsApp and Google Play, but now Tehran is bringing them back. The authorities have voted on this move. They say this is the first step, the first at easing internet restrictions. It is not clear when it will take effect, but the message is hard to miss, especially for a country like Iran. It's a major concession to their people. You may ask, why now? Why is Iran suddenly making the internet accessible, and could this move backfire? To understand this, we need to look back. For years, Iran has kept tight controls, the world's strictest internet restrictions, and rampant censorship. Access to 70% of the internet is blocked in this country. This includes platforms like YouTube, X, Instagram, Telegram. You cannot access them in Iran. And this tightening of control began in 2005. That's when Iran set up the NIN, the National Information Network. It's like China's Great Firewall. It helped Iran monitor what was going on the internet and who was accessing it. The government could see all of it. In 2010, Tehran even got a new nickname, the enemy of the internet. That's what they were called. And this continued for years. Then in 2019, a massive protest broke out in Iran. It was a protest over fuel. So Tehran shut down the internet. There was a complete blackout. In 2022, this happened again. Iran's morality police killed a 22-year-old woman called Masha Amini. Her crime? Not wearing her hijab properly. This triggered protests across the nation, and Tehran retaliated with a crackdown and another internet blackout. Which brings us to 2024. Iran has elected a new president, Masoud Pezeshkian. He is a moderate. One of his big promises was easing internet restrictions. And now he seems to be walking the talk. But that's only half the story. There's a lot more at play here. Iran's economy is in a shambles. People are struggling to make ends meet. There are crippling power cuts. There's fuel shortage. The currency rial has crashed. And all of this affects public sentiment. It puts pressure on the regime. They're on the edge. Public discontent built over a period of time is the most dangerous thing for any regime. Add to that their international troubles. Iran's allies have been toppled, Iran's proxies have been weakened, and an old foe called Donald Trump is returning to power. The last thing they can afford is another protest at home. Hence the concession. The easing of internet restrictions. It's like a peace offering to the public. It could serve two purposes. First, stimulate the economy. Businesses relying on these platforms can resume operations. It could open new doors to new opportunities. And the second, it may calm public frustration by providing greater digital access. Tehran is basically hoping to appease its citizens. But there's a catch and some lessons from history. When a regime opens the door to freedoms, it is not easy to shut it back. Take the Soviet Union, for example. In the 1980s, Gorbachev opened the economy. He gave freedom of speech and greater access to information. The idea was to make the political system more transparent. But it only fueled public frustration. There were uprisings, independence movements, and finally, the Soviet Union collapsed. Same for Arab Spring nations. Regimes that faced backlash offered limited reforms, at least some of them did. They wanted to appease the public while still controlling the country. It did not work though. The regimes were toppled one after the other. So countries like Iran may think that concessions will help, but they also give people a taste of freedom. It's like blood in the water. Once the public gets some, they want more. Could Iran be heading down the same path? Honestly, it's too soon to say. What we do know is that internet access empowers people, and for a country like Iran, this could mark the beginning of something much bigger. Whether it's change for the better or a crisis for the regime, only time will tell. Now let's talk about the United States. Next month, a new president will take office. Like many recent American leaders, Donald Trump has appointed Indian Americans to key positions. But he's not being able to shield them from racist attacks. His AI advisor, Sri Ram Krishnan, is facing a flood of hate. This is happening on X, the platform owned by Elon Musk, one of Donald Trump's closest allies. Some of these posts demand the deportation of talents like Krishnan. Others accuse Indians of exploiting America. Ironically, many of these racist posts come from Trump's own supporters. Our next report has the details.
Did any of you vote for this Indian to run America? Posts like these, featuring Sri Ram Krishnan, have been circulating widely on X in the past 24 hours. 2 days ago, Donald Trump picked Krishnan as his AI advisor. The decision was cheered by leading figures from the tech industry, and for good reason. Krishnan has an impressive resume. He has worked with the world's leading internet platforms like Facebook, Twitter, which is now X, and Snap. He also did a stint with Andreessen Horowitz, which is one of Silicon Valley's top venture capital firms. These roles paved the way for Krishnan's White House appointment. Unlike the claims of this bigot, Krishnan won't be running America. He'll be advising Trump on AI or artificial intelligence and working alongside David Sachs, the former CEO of PayPal. Trump has picked Sachs to be his White House AI and crypto czar. But Krishnan's appointment has sparked a firestorm of racist reactions, particularly on X. Take this post, for example, which urged Donald Trump to deport Sri Ram Krishnan. Here's another one calling Indians third world invaders. And this one claims that Indians are exploiting America. What's striking is that all these accounts are verified profiles on X. Krishnan's views on America's H-1B policy have been targeted in particular. He's called for country-specific limits on H-1B visas to be lifted. Then there are the conspiracy theories, like this one claiming that Krishnan isn't even an American. X has tried to fact-check these lies by attaching community notes. David Sachs wrote a post himself to defend his colleague. Even Elon Musk stepped in to support Krishnan. But as often happens on the internet, it's the hate that gets the loudest voice. Ironically, many of these racist comments come from users who are vocal supporters of Trump. Like Nas, who wrote this viral and racist post on X. Take a look at his profile. Nas has reshared many posts from Trump's supporters. They urge the president-elect to uphold his America First approach and block more talented Indians like Krishnan from coming to the United States. This wave of hate shouldn't come as a surprise. It reflects a deeper reality in American society that Indian Americans often face racism in America. A survey from last year shed light on this troubling issue. The findings were stark. 1 in 2 Indian adults reported facing discrimination. The reasons? Their color, race or ethnicity. The reasons? Their color, race or ethnicity. The reaction to Sri Ram Krishnan's appointment only reinforces this truth. Racism against Indians is deeply embedded in American society.
Hello and a very warm welcome. Thanks for tuning in to CNN News 18. A Merry Christmas to one and all. For now, we quickly shift our attention to a CNN News 18 exclusive that's just come in. Details of the same on your screens, viewers. CNN News 18 exclusive. Pakistan airstrikes have killed 20 in Afghanistan. The Afghanistan government says they will retaliate. According to the Afghanistan government, airstrikes have killed only civilians and they've also called these unfortunate strikes. This happened at a time when talks with Pakistan's special representative have been ongoing in Kabul. So this is the latest bit of breaking news update coming in. Some of those visuals also that we'll try and put out in just a bit. But going across to Siddhant Mishra joining us with more details. Siddhant, you know, with the Afghanistan government very closely monitoring the situation, tell us a little bit about how they're viewing this and most importantly about what we know with regards to these airstrikes in Afghanistan.
Well, Pakistan airstrikes killed 20 in Afghanistan. In fact, the Afghanistan government says that they are going to retaliate. This perhaps escalated tensions between Afghanistan and Pakistan. In fact, the airstrikes killed civilians. This is what is being reported. Strikes happened at the time when talks with Pakistan's special representative Mead was going on in Kabul. In fact, the Defense Ministry has called it a brutal bombing. Afghan Defense Ministry has called it a brutal bombing. Pakistan, in its defense, has to say that the security that this has been done on the hideouts of TTP, where and dozens of TTP militants were killed in the bombing. TTP sources say that the camp of Pakistani displaced people and civilians were killed. Earlier, Pakistan's special representative met Sirajuddin Haqqani and Mustaki in Kabul. So perhaps there are two versions that we are getting right now. Afghanistan has to say that the civilians have been killed in the brutal air bombings by Pakistan. Pakistan has to say that the TTP hideouts have been hit. Now, Pakistan always had issues with TTP because Pakistan security sources say that TTP is responsible for most of the blasts that have taken place in Pakistan in last 1 year or even more than that. So the TTP targets were struck, but Afghanistan has to say that the civilian targets were hit by the Pakistani forces. And interestingly, it happened when the special representative talk was going on in Kabul. It would really be interesting to see that how situation unfolds here onwards. But right now, this has escalated tensions between in the AFPAC region.
Okay, there's most certainly an escalation in the tensions between the two. Already there were tensions that were simmering, Siddhant, given the presence of Pakistani militants in Afghanistan. From that to finally, reaching a point where we see these airstrikes, at least 20 of them in Afghanistan, Pakistan airstrikes being carried out. You're telling us about the version coming in from the Afghan officials, but what about Pakistan? Anything officially that's been stated as yet?
Well, yes, they have Pakistan intel sources have.
Moving to Vietnam, the country has a new internet law and it's making quite the noise. Let's show you some headlines. Vietnam's restrictive internet law comes into force. Critics decry Vietnam's draconian new internet law. Internet crackdown shrinks room for activism in Vietnam. There's a lot of backlash. So what exactly is this new law? What happens if you don't abide by it? Is it good or bad? Let's look at the law first. It's called the Decree 147. It applies to social media platforms. They must now verify their users in Vietnam. The likes of Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, they must all do it. Anyone in Vietnam using the internet must provide their details, like their email ID or contact details. And that's not all. Every user account must be verified with either their phone number or their Vietnamese identification number. Along with this, social media platforms must ask for other information like your full name and your date of birth. Tech companies have to store all this data, and when asked, they must provide it to authorities immediately. If the government tells you to remove some content, you must do it within 24 hours. This is for a tech company. Also, only verified accounts can live stream. This, in a nutshell, is the new law. Social media companies have 90 days to comply. If they don't, they will face the consequences. Although this isn't really new. Vietnam has a long history of internet censorship. The government stamps out dissent. It arrests critics, especially those who find an audience on social media. I'll give you the example of Duong Van Thai. He's a blogger with almost 120,000 subscribers on YouTube. On his channel, he had regular live streams, all critical of the government. In the month of October, he was jailed for 12 years. What was his crime? Publishing anti-state information. So this new law is not out of brand for Vietnam. That should explain the criticism and the backlash. But we also must ask a question here. Is it all bad? Is there an upside in this move? We ask because the internet is a vast, unregulated place. We can all do with greater accountability and more regulation. It could help curb online fraud, fake news and cybercrime. In a digital age, making users accountable is not such a bad idea after all. If implemented properly, it can be a strong deterrent. But that doesn't seem to be the motive here. Vietnam may argue that this is about better security, but it's clearly also building a tool for censorship, to suppress dissent, to silence journalists and activists, and to shrink the space for free speech, all under the guise of boosting cybersecurity. The demands for data collection are a clear red flag. So what does it mean for Vietnam? Does it mean more safety or silence on the internet? The answer depends really on who holds the keys to this digital lockbox, and more importantly, how they choose to turn them. Vietnam is not alone in this struggle. Countries across the world face the same dilemma. How do you balance security with privacy? How do you protect without oppressing? There are no easy answers. The only way is to hold broad consultations, build regulation, and enforce it without fear or favor. Easier said than done. But this conversation is crucial because in the digital age, every law that shapes the internet ultimately shapes the society behind it. The year is coming to an end. It's the perfect time to take stock of your feelings, to see what is working and what isn't. The Japanese did this recently. Their government held an anxiety survey just to see how everyone is doing, and the result is a little concerning. Nearly 80% of the island nation is anxious. This sounds a lot like a lot because it is. This is a record high level of anxiety for Japan. Sure, the Japanese have a range of issues. They have a shortage of matcha and an excess of sushi. But jokes aside, why is Japan so anxious? And how do they compare to other nations? Here's a report.
When you think of Japan, what comes to mind? Maybe Mount Fuji, cherry blossoms, or even samurai swords. Well, what about anxiety? We ask because Japan has recorded record high levels of anxiety. A government survey was held recently and it says that 78.2% Japanese people are anxious. This is up from 75.9% just last year. The Japanese increasingly feel that their standard of living is declining. 64% of them are worried about their health. 63% fear retirement. They are concerned about future income and savings. In fact, 64% are unhappy with what they earn. This anxiety doesn't come as a surprise because Japan faces an array of issues. This includes an excess sushi problem and a matcha shortage crisis. But that's not what we're talking about. This has been a tumultuous year for the island nation. In February, Japan unexpectedly slipped into a recession. The yen has been on the skids for years, but this summer it hit a record low. And lately, inflation has persisted in the country. It accelerated last month and prices rose by 2.7%, which is above the 2% inflation target of the Bank of Japan.
Every month I receive notices of prices increasing. Right now, we have no choice but to endure and continue making delicious food. It's our job to bow to our customers and get through this period.
Just like ramen shops, companies offering goods and services that are in demand are able to transfer costs to product prices and see their sales grow even if they raise their prices to some level. On the other hand, those struggling to pass on higher costs are being weeded out.
So, rising prices are a major pain point, and so is the roller coaster economy. The Japanese also face uncertain job prospects. All these factors have created the perfect storm of unhappiness. In fact, the Japanese are so unhappy that they don't want to live too long. Recently, a survey was conducted across 6 countries: Japan, the United States, China, South Korea, Germany, and Finland. People were asked how they felt about longevity, if they wanted to live to be 100. And this is what the survey found. Japan had the most number of people who were unhappy with the prospect. Only 21% of Japanese people would be happy to reach the age of 100. And just 27% of Japanese want to live to be 100. Compare that to 52% of Germans, 53% of South Koreans, 58% of Finns, 65% of Chinese, and 66% of Americans. Happiness in Japan is witnessing a downward trend. Yes, the economy plays a role, but there are cultural reasons as well. from highly competitive education to long working hours. So much so that they have a word for death by overwork. It is called karoshi. Japan also has a falling birth rate and marriage rate. This year, their population fell for the 15th consecutive year. It's now at a record low. Japan has a cocktail of problems and way too much sushi to pair with it. No wonder the country is anxious.
Christmas is finally here. It's a busy day for Santa Claus. The belief is that he is somewhere up in the skies riding his sleigh from one corner of the world to another. So we thought, why not do an experiment? Imagine you are Santa Claus in your sleigh. What would you see if you looked down? Let's find out. You're flying over East Asia first. Down in South Korea, you see massive public protests. The people are unhappy with their impeached president, Yoon Suk-yeol. He tried to impose martial law last month. The lawmakers responded by impeaching him. Whether he gets removed or not depends on South Korea's constitutional court. Korean prosecutors are also probing him, but Yoon is not responding to their summons. So South Korea is pretty tense right now. As you fly to the west, you cross the South China Sea. You look down, you see a standoff. Chinese ships are harassing the Philippine Navy. They're firing water cannons at Manila's ships. Overall, you see a lot more military assets in the region. China has built airstrips and bases on islands. The Philippines is busy building dozens of new ships. And Vietnam is reclaiming land to make artificial islands. It is all the ingredients of a conflict. If you zoom in, you can spot Taiwan. If you zoom in further, you can see China's military around it. 3 jets and 6 warships. That's what Taiwan detected today. Let's move further west now to one of the highest points in the world, the Himalayas. You look down and for a change, you don't see a standoff. You see what's left of it. India and China have pulled back soldiers from eastern Ladakh. They struck a border deal in October. You can see Indian soldiers patrolling snowy mountains. You can also see herders grazing nearby. Just a few years ago, there was a violent clash in the same place. It led to a freeze in bilateral ties, but now things are improving. Let's see what happens next. As you fly deeper into Asia, the scenes change. There is tension, there is destruction, and there is desperation. In Iran, you can see the regime in a state of panic. Their proxies have been weakened or destroyed. Their economy is not doing well. Their people are feeling rebellious. The Ayatollah is grappling with a tough decision. Should he relax his hold on power or should he hold tight and chase a nuclear bomb? Let's leave him to it. Further west, you will see something heartbreaking. Around 1.9 million people out of their homes in the cold, displaced, hungry and desperate. These are the people of Gaza. They have been under attack for more than a year. If you look closely, you may see Israeli missiles. They struck Gaza even on Christmas Day. Reports say 23 people were killed. Over in Israel, you can hear the air raid sirens ring. Yemen's Houthis are firing rockets at Israeli cities. No need to panic though. Their Iron Dome is making short work of it. It's time to leave Asia now. The next stop is Ukraine. Thousands of people are attending masses and gatherings, but if you listen closely, you can hear sirens. You can also see that some parts of the country are dark. Russia launched cruise missiles at Ukraine's energy infrastructure today. Nearly 500,000 people are without power. In Kiev, the panic is evident. President Zelensky has resisted Putin for nearly 3 years, but he may have to concede in 2025. Now it's time to fly down south to Africa. In Sudan, a conflict is underway. The paramilitary is fighting the army. They've been clashing for nearly 20 months now. Hundreds of people have been killed and many more injured. You can see that a famine has already set in. The United Nations says it will expand in the coming months. Further south in Mozambique, you can see the streets littered with debris. The country is trying to recover from deadly clashes yesterday. A recent election has been disputed by the opposition. The top court sided with the ruling party. What followed was chaos. Nearly 24 people were killed in 24 hours. Buckle in now, because it's time for a long transatlantic flight. Our first stop is Florida. You can see Donald Trump in Mar-a-Lago. He's probably got Elon Musk with him. Trump is preparing for his inauguration next month. It promises to be a disruptive yet consequential presidency. Up north in Canada, you can see a lonely Justin Trudeau, no friends in the party, no allies in parliament, and isolated on the global stage. Take a good look at him, because chances are he won't be there next Christmas. That wraps up our aerial survey. We saw chaos, protests, war and desperation, and yes, a few rays of hope too. Even the Pope is concerned about the state of affairs. He delivered a Christmas sermon. He delivers it every year. This time he sounded like the United Nations chief. So many calls for ceasefire.
May the sound of arms be silenced in war-torn Ukraine. May there be the boldness needed to open the door to negotiation and to gestures of dialogue and encounter in order to achieve a just and lasting peace. May the sound of arms be silenced in the Middle East. In contemplating the crib of Bethlehem, I think of the Christian communities in Palestine and Israel, particularly to the beloved people of Gaza, where the humanitarian situation is extremely grave.
If you think about it, this year had everything. Multiple regime changes, multiple wars, multiple humanitarian crises, and 73 elections sandwiched in between. Yet it feels like nothing significant happened, which is a sign of the times we live in. We've been through so much in this decade already: a pandemic, deadly wars, even nuclear rhetoric, so much so that we've normalized chaos. As this year comes to an end, it's important to remind ourselves that this is not normal. Peace and stability is supposed to be normal. 2024 did not bring much of that. Let's hope 2025 is better. Savior, Redeemer, Messiah, Son of God, Christ. Throughout history, Jesus has been known by many names. But Top G has not been one of them. That is until now. Enter Gen Z. The young are becoming one with God. They're talking about the divine bro, aka Jesus Christ, and spilling the holy tea, meaning the gospel. Not in church, but on TikTok, where dozens of accounts are yassifying the Bible, getting millions of views, and giving Jesus a holy makeover. The young are rewriting Bible scriptures, where the crucifixion is a glow-up, where Jesus has riz or charisma, where the disciples are stressing hard, so the divine bro asks them to chill. Bible stories have been rewritten with modern slang memes and punctuation or the lack thereof, which will make your heart ache. But Gen Z says, bro, chill, because they have a different goal here: to keep people vibing with the Bible. They want to make the holy text more accessible, even if that means taking a digital approach in a loose conversational style. And while their heart is in the right place, the Gen Z Bible does call Mary a pick-me girl, or a woman who is trying too hard to win male attention. Of course, not everyone is happy about this. Critics say this trivializes the scripture. They call it disrespectful. Some social media users have even called it blasphemous. But the reactions are mixed. Some Christian scholars have in fact praised this approach. They're reading it in church, and they call it the evolution that Christianity needs, the bridge between ancient wisdom and modern-day pop culture. They think it could inspire more youngsters to read the Bible, and they may have a point, because Bible sales have skyrocketed this year. They soared by 22%, mostly thanks to young college students in the West who are buying the book in droves. This is a hallelujah moment for Christianity. It has been slowly dying in the West. In 2010, Europe's Christian population stood at 553 million. By 2050, it is expected to drop to 454 million. That's a fall of about 100 million. In fact, the decline is already evident in huge Gothic cathedrals with empty pews, or in shuttered church buildings which are increasingly being converted into nightclubs. That's Europe for you. The US is following closely. 8 in 10 Americans say the church is losing influence. About 64% Americans call themselves Christian today, which may sound like a lot, but about 50 years ago, this number stood at 90%. The decline is so sharp that by 2070, Christians may no longer form the majority in the US. The church is trying to change that. They're trying to curry favor with the young. The Vatican has an anime-style mascot. They have launched an app-driven digital rosary, and a Swiss city has installed an AI Jesus Christ. You can visit the church, ask the Jesus screen anything, and he will respond. And this is not just about apps, AI or TikTok, and this is not just about Christianity either. Studies show that Gen Z is the least religious generation the world over. Sure, there are exceptions, like here in India, where 8 in 10 people believe in God, or Iran, which is a very religious society. But these are, like I said, exceptions. The norm is a decline in belief. Many countries where religion was important a century ago have some of the lowest belief rates in the world now. And many countries that are still strongly religious have seen recent declines. It's something that we rarely talk about how a religion dies, because we think of religious teachings or rituals as timeless. History shows they're not. Look at the Egyptians, the Greek, or the Norse pantheons. They're now simply legends or myths. So the Gen Z approach may have cracks. It can certainly do with better language, but it's also an attempt to make religion accessible. At the end of the day, faith does not mean rejecting the idea of change. To be passed down, it must evolve and be in tune with the times.
Hello and a very warm welcome. Thanks for tuning in to CNN News 18. A Merry Christmas to one and all. For now, we quickly shift our attention to a CNN News 18 exclusive that's just come in. Details of the same on your screens, viewers. CNN News 18 exclusive. Pakistan airstrikes have killed 20 in Afghanistan. The Afghanistan government says they will retaliate. According to the Afghanistan government, airstrikes have killed only civilians, and they've also called these unfortunate strikes. This happened at a time when talks with Pakistan's special representative have been ongoing in Kabul. So this is the latest bit of breaking news update coming in. Some of those visuals also that we'll try and put out in just a bit. But going across to Siddhant Mishra joining us with more details. Siddhant, you know, with the Afghanistan government very closely monitoring the situation, tell us a little bit about how they're viewing this, and most importantly about what we know with regards to these airstrikes in Afghanistan.
Well, Pakistan airstrikes killed 20 in Afghanistan. In fact, the Afghanistan government says that they are going to retaliate. This perhaps escalated tensions between Afghanistan and Pakistan. In fact, the airstrikes killed civilians. This is what is being reported. Strikes happened at the time when talks with Pakistan's special representative Mead was going on in Kabul. In fact, the Defense Ministry has called it a brutal bombing. Afghan Defense Ministry has called it a brutal bombing. Pakistan, in its defense, has to say that the security that this has been done on the hideouts of TTP, where and dozens of TTP militants were killed in the bombing. TTP sources say that the camp of Pakistani displaced people and civilians were killed. Earlier, Pakistan's special representative met Sirajuddin Haqqani and Mustaki in Kabul. So perhaps there are two versions that we are getting right now. Afghanistan has to say that the civilians have been killed in the brutal air bombings by Pakistan. Pakistan has to say that the TTP hideouts have been hit. Now, Pakistan always had issues with TTP because Pakistan security sources say that TTP is responsible for most of the blasts that have taken place in Pakistan in last 1 year or even more than that. So the TTP targets were struck, but Afghanistan has to say that the civilian targets were hit by the Pakistani forces. And interestingly, it happened when the special representative talk was going on in Kabul. It would really be interesting to see that how situation unfolds here onwards. But right now, this has escalated tensions between in the AFPAC region.
Okay, there's most certainly an escalation in the tensions between the two. Already there were tensions that were simmering, Siddhant, given the presence of Pakistani militants in Afghanistan. From that to finally, reaching a point where we see these airstrikes, at least 20 of them in Afghanistan, Pakistan airstrikes being carried out. You're telling us about the version coming in from the Afghan officials, but what about Pakistan? Anything officially that's been stated as yet?
Well, yes, they have, Pakistan intel sources have confirmed this to Manoj Gupta, that the targets which were hit belong to the TTP. They were TTP hideouts, and no civilian targets were struck by the Pakistani forces. So that is what Pakistan is saying in its defense, because they also don't want Afghanistan to say that the civilians have been killed or civilian targets were struck. But Afghanistan has to say that has called it a brutal bombing, and Afghanistan has to say that the civilians have been targeted. Perhaps this would escalate tensions in the whole of AFPAC region, which is already unstable. Islamist forces have a larger role to play as far as the Afghanistan-Pakistan border is concerned. Both countries keep alleging each other for the cross-border terrorism. And in fact, there have been many attempts also to perhaps find solutions through diplomacy. But it looks like the diplomacy has failed again. And, the way Pakistan has struck the targets within the Afghanistan, and civilians have been perhaps...
We know artificial intelligence would be dangerous. We all knew that. But just how dangerous? We're finding out this Christmas season, politicians love to be seen as giving and generous, as the guys who bring cheer and smiles. If you think about it, that's also what Santa does. And if you mix the two, what do you get? Politicians as Santa. Thanks to AI, it's not a nightmare anymore. It's possible to create such pictures and videos. Some are creating it themselves, others can thank their fans and supporters. Take a look. Now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. As the world celebrates Christmas, we leave you with visuals from across the globe. Thank you for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
Just getting ready for the holiday, and a couple little things we have here with us to just prepare, which will be sort of fun in a couple days.
Green Lamb Laminates presents CNN News 18 Primetime Studio.